What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Blogger Bowl Week 6 preview, Matt. We did a whole spiel. Went all the way through the Texas and Oklahoma game before we realized that the feed messed up and we had not gone live. So we're
That's quite
live.
okay.
We're going to launch into it. I'm not going to tell the Quacktavius story again, but just go Google search Quacktavius for something that's good.
It's a great story.
It's a great story.
If you like emotional support ducks and Oregon
named Quacktavius
and teams keeping animals around for good juju.
There you go. Hudson was the name of the dog. I just remembered.
That's it.
Real quick, before we get into the Texas OU game, I just want to point this out. The Big Ten just announced their 2024 conference opponents for next year. Michigan, Matt, plays Ohio State, USC, then at Michigan State, at Maryland, at Minnesota, at UCLA, at Wisconsin, and they also play Texas in the non-con. So Michigan, the bill is coming due for Michigan not scheduling any
for 2 years in a row.
5 years. Anyway, so big weekend in college football, and we will start with the game that's it is the biggest. I mean, I'm not even being a biased fan. It is a top. I saw this was like the third time these two teams were both 5-0 coming into this game, which is surprising. Although maybe that's just kind of 5-0 as the line of demarcation there, just because they both played 5 games and are 5-0. But nevertheless, Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is a 6.5 point favorite. The total is 60.5. This is a weird rivalry. Before last year's blowout, 7 of the previous 8 games were decided by one score, and the one that wasn't was the Big 12 title game that was tied going into the fourth quarter. This game's about the tangible and intangible, so let's start with the tangible. If Texas finishes drives, they're going to win this game. Texas is 16th in the country in quality possession creation. They've proven very capable at moving the ball. However, they're just 89th in the country in points per quality possession. Against Kansas, Texas scored a touchdown on their first possession, but then had 2 field goals, a missed field goal, and a bad red zone interception on the rest of their first half possessions. You can't turn 4 quality possessions into 6 points against Oklahoma and expect to win this game. Oklahoma allows just 1.24 points per quality possession on defense. For Oklahoma, this is a step up in competition. How do they handle it? They haven't really been pushed yet and played a lightweight schedule. SMU game got dodgy. The Cincinnati game was a little bit dodgy. And those are the 2 best teams they've played, and they weren't overly convincing, though neither was particularly close. Last year's effort in this game was embarrassing, which was entirely on Brent Venables. They've been recruiting well, so it's not like there's warning signs or anything, but he's looking for his first signature win. And if you look at the rest of their schedule, if they lose this game, the chances of getting that signature win are gone until a presumptive rematch in the Big 12 title game. So Oklahoma comes into this game as kind of a relative unknown. Dillon Gabriel missed last year's game against Texas, but when he's been healthy, he's been consistently good. Oklahoma doesn't have the typical Oklahoma bell cow running back we're used to seeing from them on offense, which is usually a big deal in this game. Usually the best running team wins, and it feels like that's Texas with Jonathan Brooks, who's been putting up big yardage, but Texas's efficiency numbers running the ball aren't great either. The only relative weakness Oklahoma has shown is that while they aren't bad, they aren't the most efficient early down offense. Neither is Texas. If Texas can get them off schedule and into second and third and long, it might be a long day. At the end of the day, it's a rivalry game, and the line looks like it's settling around 6.5. You said it was 6 at DraftKings earlier, which might be a lean towards Texas. But if it's 6.5, that's asking bettors to just pick a side. I'm staying away. If it somehow gets to 7, which it doesn't seem like that's the case, I'd objectively take Oklahoma just because of the tense nature of this rivalry for almost a decade now. I do have one bet on this game. It's a player prop, which we will get to when we get to our bets. Matt, what are your thoughts as a neutral on this game?
As a neutral observer, I really seem to like Texas. I lean towards Texas. I haven't really been all that impressed with what Oklahoma's done so far this year, especially the couple games you said against decent opponents in SMU and Cincinnati. They won, but they only looked fine. And I think Texas is still at so many times this year, their offenses look dangerous. And I was talking to you before. I think when we had the false start of a recording, the way you're describing Texas's offense to me is the way I've described Notre Dame's offense a lot this year. They can move the ball. They're just they're struggling to finish once they get in the red zone, once they get close. And it seems like if Texas is able to finish, they're going to win this game by multiple scores. I think they're the more talented team. I think they're the deeper team. I think they're the better team up front. As of right now, I think they're the better coach team, but this is a rivalry game. Like we talked about with Georgia and Auburn. Obviously, this isn't the disparity talent-wise as that one was. It's a rivalry game where weird things happen, and the games seem to be close kind of no matter what. But if Texas goes out and takes care of business like this, I'm not saying 49-0 or whatever, like it was last year, but it seems like a game Texas should handle. That said, when I'm in your position as a fan and going into a rivalry game of a team that's this type of favorite, close to a touchdown, more talented, should win if they play the way they should, that's when I feel the most nervous, because I think something is always just going to go wrong. And then if you end up not winning, you feel even worse. As a neutral observer, I'm leaning towards Texas.
So a couple of notes here. This just kind of came across about 15 minutes ago. Jatavion Sanders, Texas tight end, is expected to play, according to Steve Sarkisian, said he's good to go. The report I heard earlier this week was doubtful, and from the guy who said it, that's kind of funny if you know the guy. But Jatavion Sanders expected to play. One guy not part of my player prop to keep an eye on for the Longhorns, a name I want to put out is Jalen Catalon. Jalen Catalon was an all-freshman SEC defensive back his first year at Arkansas. And then was hurt the rest of his career there. I mean, he was a guy who just flashed amazing talent and just has had bad luck with injuries. He's back. And I mean, he's a guy who plays with bad intent. He wants to lay the wood, lay the lumber, and he's going to hit you, and he's going to hit you hard. And I mean, I think the kind of physical nature of this, if you saw the funny touchdown from the Kansas game where Jason Bean fumbled it and the running back returned it for a touchdown, or picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown, is because Jalen Catalon dislodged the ball in a game where big hits kind of turn the momentum and get the crowd fired up and this kind of thing. Jalen Catalon's a guy who I think is going to be a big part of what Texas wants to do. They've kind of been limiting his snaps. They rotate their safeties a lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a little bit more run in this game.
Is Texas wearing the road whites or the burnt oranges in this one? I forgot, because I remember last year I didn't get to watch it. My dad and brothers and I actually played Whistling Straits randomly on this Saturday last year. So it was gave up a college football Saturday to go play there. But I remember tracking the game on my phone, but I don't think I saw a single highlight.
Texas is the home team. Yeah, Texas is going to be in their orange. They were the home team.
I feel like they play better in the white uniforms, Dan.
I do too, but
I don't know if I like that. I still like Texas, but I'd be more comfortable if they were in the whites.
That's fair. Staying in the state of Texas, I'm just going thematically, just staying in the state of Texas for another really, really big game in College Station, Alabama at Texas A&M. I believe when we did the show Tuesday, this line was still 2.5 or 3.5.
Now it's almost a one, right? 1.5.
It's Alabama minus 1.5. 46.5 is the total at FanDuel. This is a huge game for both of these coaches, right? Like, with a loss, Nick Saban would have 2 losses by October for the first time since his first year at Alabama in 2007. With a win, Jimbo Fisher can quiet some of the questions people have had about him in the program while squarely putting themselves in the driver's seat to win the division. Will A&M rise to the occasion, or like we saw when Alabama played Ole Miss, will the mature, grown-up program find a way to win? Maturity is a big theme for me this year, Matt. This is a much worse situation, though, for Alabama going on the road to Kyle Field. They're 89th.
It's tricky. Go ahead. No, finish. You got a stat there. I wanted to hear it.
Alabama is 89th in the country in early down EPA per play. Their offense puts itself in bad situations repeatedly. Asking Jalen Milroe to convert 3rd and longs in a loud, hostile environment seems like a recipe for disaster. He's more than capable of creating big plays with his arm and his legs, but it's still a lot to ask. The big question mark for A&M, how good is Max Johnson? 2 years ago when he was at LSU, he was 16 for 32 for 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick against Alabama. He's a pretty big unknown. He's a guy whose talent has flashed in the past, but at a certain point, it's fair to wonder why he's consistently passed on the depth chart everywhere he goes. Is it because he has a limited ceiling? What are your expectations here?
I'm starting to buy into Bama a little bit more and more. I was impressed by them against Ole Miss. I was impressed by them again last week. Like, I know weird things have happened when Bama's played A&M and A&M's played Bama really tough, but if Connor Wegman was playing this game for A&M, I think I'd be more in on the Aggies and think they were probably going to pull this one off. But I just have a tough time believing a backup quarterback for Texas A&M is going to beat Alabama, especially with the Bama offense is starting to. They're not great, but they're starting to figure it out a little bit. They're starting to heat up. They're getting a little bit better. They're kind of able to run the football a little bit more. And I'm still buying into that Alabama defense. Like, I know LSU's defense is absolutely terrible, but Ole Miss just put up 55 on them, and the week before, Bama held them to 10 points, I think it was.
24.
I'm going to go down with the ship with Alabama. I think that this is a game that they're going to kind of keep silencing people, and we're going to look up at the end of the year, and they're going to be in a down year in an SEC championship game against Georgia. Is it going to be tricky? Sure. And weird things tend to happen in this rivalry game, especially when we go to A&M. But I think in the end, it's Saban and the Tide over Jimbo.
That's an interesting perspective, the comparison there. Although I think the Ole Miss game was in Tuscaloosa, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, different environments. I know there's a lot of factors, but
That's the
like
only thing I'd push back on
it's
a
not
little
a
bit.
bad Ole Miss offense. Is
No,
what
it's not at all.
it,
I mean,
it, and they
we in back-to-back weeks we saw the high end and the low end of what
yes.
Ole Miss's offense is going to do. Real quick, nothing to do with nothing, but I don't know if I mentioned this. I mentioned it the other day. The Texas-Oklahoma game is at the Cotton Bowl Stadium, which is in the middle of the State Fair of Texas, which is going on right now. My college
I gotta
roommate,
go to that one day, Dan.
it's
I
awesome,
gotta
dude.
go to
It's
that
so
one.
good.
My brother's been. I've heard all the stories.
My college roommate he works in TV production. He's a producer editor, and he worked on a show for A&E called Deep Fried Dynasty, which you can watch on
I know
Hulu.
that
It's
one.
really
Yeah.
it's over. He even admits it that it was overproduced, but the show's really entertaining nevertheless, and it's obviously about all the vendors at the state fair. He went to go to the state fair today, catch up with some of the people that he knew there, and just sent us like the program of all of the new foods this year at the state fair. It is the absolute best. Absolutely worth checking out at some point in your life is going to that game. I don't know why I put in these games in the order I put them in, but we're just going to keep going down my list.
Fine with me.
Kentucky at Georgia, an interesting game based on how both teams played last week. Kentucky's a 14.5-point road dog in Athens. 47.5 is the total. If you were living under a rock or out playing golf last week or doing whatever, Ray Davis is an absolute monster for Kentucky. He showed it at Vanderbilt last year, so much so that when he torched Kentucky, they pursued him in the transfer portal, which was great for them because he ran for 280 yards on Florida last week. The problem, though, Devin Leary has minus 20 rushing yards this season. He is not a mobile quarterback. He is not a threat in the run game. He's also been really mediocre so far this year in the passing game. Kentucky is 84th in EPA per pass play and 92nd in passing success rate. So I love that Kentucky wants to play big boy football. I'm just not sure on the road at a Georgia team that's probably going to be a bit pissed off about how they played against Auburn is the best recipe for success. If you look at what Georgia did, the Georgia gave up a lot of yards against Auburn on the ground, but most of that was by quarterbacks. They really used misdirection and quarterback runs to keep Georgia off balance, which that's not what Kentucky's game plan is. That said, 14.5 points is a lot. I'm not sure if that's Georgia's priors doing a lot of the work, but I don't think this is a great matchup for the Kentucky offense. Nevertheless, this feels like a galvanizing game for Georgia. The Georgia crowd has a reason to be loud because it's the first time that maybe some doubt about how good this team is, but Kentucky usually can make things a little tricky on Georgia. So I do have a bet on this game later, which I will get to. Matt, what are your thoughts here as Georgia and Kentucky face off between the hedges down in Athens on Saturday?
I feel more comfortable about Kentucky if, like you said, if Devin Leary was playing like, the potential that we thought Devin Leary had going into this year that he kind of showed at the beginning of the year at NC State last season. But I think Kentucky is going to have a tough time going into Athens and trying to beat Georgia by playing Georgia's game when they're just probably not quite as good at it at just about every facet. Like, can they run the ball? Yes, but Georgia's still Georgia, and defensively they have dudes all over the field. They're probably going to be able to stop the run, though Auburn was able to move the football on the ground last week. But like we talked about, different environment on the road, weird things happen in that game. I think Georgia's comeback and the kind of the rediscovery of, we have Brock Bowers now. I think that's going to spark Georgia's offense a little bit, and I think it's going to be a tight-ish game. Like, I don't see Georgia pulling away with this one, but I think it's just one that Georgia's probably going to have control of for the most part, and I don't think that in the end Kentucky's going to be able to put up enough points.
It's a fair assessment. Before we move on to our next game, there's more breaking news in college football that I think is interesting. Not one of the games we're going to talk about, but it involves the Syracuse-North Carolina game. The NCAA has reversed their course and have declared Tez Walker eligible for North Carolina.
Oh, nice.
The wide receiver who, of course, Mac Brown went on the rampage, the warpath, when he was declared ineligible, and there's been a whole issue there between the NCAA and North Carolina. They said they got new information, or North Carolina didn't disclose something or whatever. Basically, the NCAA is trying to blame North Carolina for
the NCAA is basically admitting they messed up without admitting they messed up.
Nevertheless, Tez Walker is eligible. That line's 8.5. I don't remember what it was when we talked about this the other day, but that should make the North Carolina passing offense a lot better. The Pac-12, I feel like next week is a huge week in the Pac-12. So, the two biggest games of the week are in the Pac-12 next week. But I feel like we're going to have to do a Pac-12 game every week, no matter what.
We're going to have a Pac-12 game of the week with how the schedule goes. That's how fun this conference is. That's how many teams can get to the Pac-12 championship game. it's just going to be an awesome bloodbath for the rest of the way.
I forgot what I was going to say. Nevertheless, about
talk about whatever our Pac-12 game of the week is.
Well, yeah, and it's like we said, it's a light week, but there's a really, really interesting game as Washington State heads on the road to play UCLA. UCLA is a 3.5-point favorite, the total 59.5. Washington State won the Pac-12 title game in their last game, so now they get to go play in the Rose Bowl, so that's pretty cool. The Rose Bowl game and playing UCLA in the Rose Bowl, a little bit different.
I wish this was a night game.
I don't think we're going to see a quarterback throw 9 touchdown passes in a losing effort the way Anthony Gordon did the last time Wazoo played UCLA in 2019. I don't know if you remember that game because I worked on that highlight for SportsCenter, but my brain is terrible, so like I didn't remember it. But when I was looking at like past results in this game, it's like 67-63, and then I was like, oh yeah, I remember that game. With every Washington State game,
yes, I do remember that game.
Huh?
I do remember that game now that you bring it up.
It was like quintessential Pac-12 after dark. Yep. With every Washington State game, it's about protecting Cam Ward. UCLA has a sack percentage around 10%, which is a really good number. So the protection up front is the key. The Rose Bowl is not really a home field advantage, and I bet there's going to be a good amount of crimson in the stadium. It's the first trip to play in the Rose Bowl since 2015 for Washington State, and who knows when the next one will be since this year's Rose Bowl game is a playoff game. UCLA is going to want to play keep away. I love Dante Moore's potential, but asking him to go strike for strike with Cam Ward seems unfair to him. Washington State is 91st in the country in rush defense success rate, so I'd expect UCLA to lean on Carson Steele and their run game to try to take some of the pressure off of Dante Moore.
I know you said it's not much of a home field advantage, obviously, but this is like you look at Washington State's schedule. I know they played at Colorado State earlier, but like this is their first kind of true road test, and they played well through so far this year. They have the big win at home against Oregon State, but this is kind of the first time they've had to go on the road, play a pretty good team, and I'm interested to see how they respond to that. UCLA is going to try and run the football, I think, and ask Dante Moore to make a few big throws when he has to. But in the end, Cam Ward is just playing such good football right now, and if you can translate that to the road, like this is the guy. I know me and Phil talked about Cam Ward and his potential last year at Washington State, and I think we saw some flashes of it. But like this is the guy that we were all excited to see last year. We were talking about him. Like it seemed like he needed a year to get his feet wet, and now he's just kind of taking off. I don't think he's thrown an interception yet this year. I'm really excited to see this Washington State team take again, not the most hostile of road environments, but still go on the road, beat a quality opponent, because that's kind of their last check mark for me to prove that, like, all right, they're a legitimate Pac-12 contender. Like they have the nice win at home against Oregon State. They can go on the road and beat a UCLA team again. It's not one of the top 3, but if they can show that they can go control the football, Cam Ward can hang on to the football, not turn it over, and they can just go take care of business, beat a solid UCLA team on the road, I will kind of upgrade them. Maybe not quite to the tier of Washington and Oregon, but like kind of maybe in the same tier as USC.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it the other day. They're kind of staring down a potential 10-2 season if they can go get this win. They do have I'm just going to say at Oregon, at Washington are both probable losses, barring injury.
Probably, but like the at Washington game that's a weird ass rivalry, and that's the last. I don't think they're going to beat Washington. Phil, and more so myself, but Phil and I have been. I think Washington can be a playoff team. I think they're the best team in the Pac-12, but that's a weird rivalry game at night. Likely, I believe it usually is. And it's the last one probably ever. So that's, if there's an anything can happen situation in a rivalry game, it's that one to keep an eye on. And Washington State is the team that's going to feel slighted by it.
If Washington is in potential to still make the playoff when they play that game, I don't think Washington State's going to have much of a chance to win it.
I don't think so either, but
yeah,
never saying. It's college football, man.
That's my point. All right. The only other game that I have notes on for today, we can't do a show without talking about Notre Dame, a really dicey spot. Notre Dame's at Louisville. Notre Dame's a 6.5-point favorite, total 53.5. I guess my big question here is, how do 2 emotional games back-to-back affect Notre Dame going on the road again this week? Notre Dame is one of those games every opposing team circles on the calendar. This can be a galvanizing game for Jeff Brom in year 1 at Louisville. They're 5-0, but the NC State game was ugly, and even though they did get the win, this, again, I talk about maturity a lot. This is another test of Notre Dame's maturity level. The fun, silly fact of the week in college football, this is the 3rd year in a row Jack Plummer has played Notre Dame at his third different school, Purdue, Cal, and now Louisville. His efficiency numbers when he's not hitting big plays in the passing game aren't very good. Louisville is fourth in passing explosiveness in the country. Notre Dame gave up one explosive play in the passing game to Duke and 3 in 38 pass attempts against a very capable Ohio State team, which I'd say is a good number. If Notre Dame has any kind of emotional letdown and Louisville hits a couple of big pass plays, this could get super dicey for Notre Dame. So what is, as a fan, what are your expectations? I mean, as someone who like thinks about this, not just as a fan, but as a fan and someone who actually like thinks about this stuff, what are your expectations for Notre Dame? Getting healthy in the wide receiver is going to help them as well, but what are your expectations for Notre Dame?
I mean, I think last week, which they are healthy at wide receiver this week. Luckily, Jaden Thomas, Jaden Greathouse, both back in the lineup, which is absolutely huge. But you talked about it. Louisville's an offense that relies on the big play, and Notre Dame's been fantastic at taking away the big play all year. I think it's just the one long run that Ohio State pulled off that's kind of the only one that really sticks out to me at this point. It's really cost them much. Even Duke, kind of, they had to chunk down the field. Like, if Notre Dame's defense plays up to their potential, I'm not sure Louisville's going to be able to go down the field on them consistently enough to win this ball game. And on the other hand, I think for the offense, especially, like, I think last week was the really, like, obviously it was not even a trap game. That was the dangerous spot. And I think the way that they kind of just survived that one was a big sigh of relief. I think the Ohio State game took a lot more out of them and clearly did. Like, it lingered into last week. I don't expect the Duke game to have that much of a lasting effect because it is in the past. They did get the monkey off their back. They did go on the road and beat a very good, very talented, very well coached Duke team. Is Louisville going to come out and play well? Yeah. Is this their Super Bowl? Absolutely. But I just think Notre Dame's the better football team. I think they have the better quarterback, and I think they have a really, really good defense with a very good secondary that's going to be able to take away the big plays.
I thought about it. I didn't put it on my card. I thought about it, but I didn't bet it was Louisville, a parlay, Louisville first quarter, Notre Dame full game spread.
Okay.
So, like, I think it was 1.5.
Louisville comes out firing early. I think that's almost exactly when Notre Dame went there. It's like 5 or 6 years ago. I remember Ian Book was the quarterback. Might have actually been the year they went to a playoff. But they had a real dicey, like, first half against Louisville, then ended up coming back and winning. But I think Louisville's going to come out inspired. But, like, you look at their wins this year. The Boston College one was nice, but Boston College is not a very good football team. Like, they are allowing 34 points to Georgia Tech. They're beating Indiana by a touchdown, NC State by a field goal. This is the first team they've actually played. If you look at their schedule, they haven't really played anybody. NC State probably gets to a bowl, but outside of that, probably nobody that's going to a bowl game. I like Notre Dame here. I think this is of the kind of murderer's row of schedule they're going through here. I think this is the most favorable opponent for them.
Oh, no doubt. I just think the schedule spot's really bad. Like, Louisville, I think is the by far, I think, the worst of these three.
I'll put it this way. I'm much happier that this game falls here than if it were to be, I don't know, not one game. I think they have a bye after USC. So say they were to beat USC and then have a bye and then have this game where Louisville comes in 7-0. I would be a lot, not that they can't lose this game. Obviously they can't. I'd be a lot more like concerned, terrified of a letdown trap spot in that spot than this one, if that makes sense. I think just the murderer's row of the schedule has kind of allowed them not to sleep on any opponents at this point. Because last week wasn't sleeping on Duke at all. Last week was an emotional letdown.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just hard week after week to play these tough, really hard fought last second kind of games week in and week out, and then go on the road.
There's nothing more they could use than a nice 17-point stress-free win.
Right. And I think the back-to-back road game element of it is difficult as well. I mean, I know it's not that bad of a travel spot from Notre Dame to Louisville, but still, I mean, it's back-to-back road game after two tough. I mean, it's just one of those where Notre Dame early sloppiness or like sleepwalking a little is what kind of worries me there. All right. I only have. Do you have any other games that you wanted to talk about? Because
I also think it could be a Sam Hartman revenge game because on Twitter, Louisville fans are talking a whole lot of crap about how I think he had like 6 turnovers last year against Louisville, and there's been a whole lot of crap being talked on Twitter. So it could be a potential spot if you like Sam Hartman to take some overs, whether that's on touchdowns, yards, or interceptions if you think it's going to backfire.
Makes sense to me. I wouldn't, it's called poking the bear, and I'm not sure that that's something that I would want to
He's
do.
a very handsome bear. You don't want to poke him.
Yes. I don't have any other games that I have notes on. I have 4 bets. I have 2 player props and 2 sides I have on my card.
Well, you
Is
give
there
me
any
the card first so I can add after.
All right. That's what we do around here. Sides first. We talked about it. We talked about this game already. I'm going to take the 14.5 with Kentucky. Georgia's better than they are. I don't know that I like Georgia to beat a well-coached team that's going to want to run the ball a lot on them by more than 2 touchdowns. I really like the hook there. So I'll take that. And then I'll take Missouri I would have liked this better the number the other day. It's come down a bit, but I'm still going to take Missouri plus 5.5 at home. Early kick in Como. We talked about it the other day. Early, like Columbia is a weird place to play. Early kickoff for LSU. Both defenses are kind of problematic at times. This is a game where, if the total wasn't so high, I'd probably play the total instead. But Missouri's pretty decent, and I just don't know that LSU.
They're a sneaky good team.
They're sneaky decent. I don't know that LSU can be able to stop them. I would love to play Luther Burden player props, but they're all outrageous. So I'm going to stay away. I'm just going to take Missouri plus 5.5 there. The player prop from the Texas-Oklahoma game I talked about, I said I was going to have for you guys. I'm taking Adonai Mitchell receiving touchdowns over a half at plus 105. I don't understand what DraftKings is doing sometimes, Matt. If you just go to anytime touchdown, he's like minus 150. But if you go to receiving touchdowns over a half, so meaning he's going to get a receiving touchdown, is plus 105. He only has 2 carries for 1 yard and doesn't return kicks. So if he's going to score a touchdown, it's going to
be a receiving one. Yeah.
I said it before with him, big time player, step up in big games. He's caught touchdowns in both semifinal games, both national title games when he was at Georgia. He had 2 touchdowns against Alabama. He's just a guy who finds the end zone when he's healthy and his team needs him. He is healthy and his team needs him. So at plus money, I'm going to take that. And I've been trying to find a way, just because I'm angry and I hate USC, to fade.
Hey, I do too.
In this game. So my other player prop is Tetaroa McMillan. Same thing. I don't think they
That's
had
a name right there.
I don't think they had any other like first touchdown or anytime touchdown props up yet, but they did have receiving touchdowns over. I'm going to take his over a half at plus 120. Arizona is probably going to be in a negative game state and trying to go score for score with USC for the most part. We know USC's defense isn't very good. They're 99th in points per quality possession allowed. So when opposing offenses create quality drives, they also do a good job of finishing them. Arizona basically has 2 receivers. They have McMillan and Jacob Cowing. McMillan has 9 fewer catches, but 1 more touchdown and averages 5 more yards per catch than Cowing. Cowing's odds are plus 110, which means he's going to catch a touchdown and McMillan's not, the way my luck is. But nevertheless, taking the slightly bigger swing here at the receiver who's a little bit more explosive than the other one. And then one bet that I'm not making, Matt, but I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not going to take Arizona State against Colorado at home, but I have this theory that attention is like Samson's hair for Colorado. They're going to be out of the news cycle this week because they now have 2 losses. This is not a high-profile game. It's on the road, and more importantly,
Drew Pine playing?
No, he didn't play the last game either. Bourget was back, or Bourget, however you pronounce it, was back. I'm going to put this out there, but do you know what network this is on, Matt?
Pac-12 network?
This is a Pac-12 network game. So nobody's going to be able to see it. If a coach prime game happens on Pac-12 network and nobody sees it, did it really happen?
That's a good question.
So I'm looking
4.5, I think, is the spread there.
Huh?
4.5, I think, is the spread.
4.5 was the spread. So I'm not taking it. This is just a theory, but that's what I'm going with.
I again, not going to put it on my card, but by the time that game rolls around, if I have a good Saturday, I might be. That's a night game, I'm assuming.
I think it's like a 7:30.
Okay, I might be convinced in my own brain to sprinkle a little Arizona State money line. All right, my card. I'm going with Maryland plus 19.5 against Ohio State. I think Ohio State's a very good team, but I think Maryland's been pretty impressive, and we saw what they did last year when they went to Michigan on the road. They gave Michigan all they could possibly handle. That's a team that they gave Ohio State all they could handle last year too in Maryland. That's just a veteran team with a really good quarterback, and I think a head coach who's become a pretty good college football head coach. I'm with you on Mizzou plus 5. Taking Washington State plus the 3.5. Bama on the money line. It's close enough that I think it's minus 120 money line, so I'm just going to take their money line there. Notre Dame, I'm laying the 6 with. Texas, I'm laying the 6 with. Florida State, I'm going to lay 24 with at home against Virginia Tech. I think
Tech is bad.
Virginia Tech's just dead.
Oh, they're bad.
I'll probably come back. This will come back to bite me, but Virginia Tech is just kind of deader than dead. And the other, I know they're coming off a 38-21 win against Pitt, and I forgot Pitt, or didn't realize Pitt had a bye week. I wanted so badly to bet on Pitt this week because they pulled Phil Jurkovec, and couldn't happen to a better guy. But I was going to give Pitt the dead quarterback bounce. And I don't like piling on college kids, but Phil Jurkovec's not really a college kid anymore. He's like 24 years old, and he is trashed everywhere he's been. He trashed Notre Dame, but when he left there, and then again before they played Notre Dame, he trashed Boston College when he left there. I have no doubt he's going to trash Pitt at some point when he leaves there. Just kind of laughed a little bit alongside Florida Phil when we saw this week when we saw that Jurkovec got pulled.
In fairness, I'm not sure that I would say that trashing Jeff Hafley or Pat Narduzzi would necessarily be out of line, if we're being honest.
That's also a fair point, but more so Phil Jurkovec.
Yeah, man. I don't have a history lesson this week. Like I said, I've had a really hard time focusing on there's not the board didn't speak to me this week, Matt. The board was.
I'm with you. The NFL board spoke a little bit more to me. The college board, not as much. And I still had 8 picks or something like that. So
something like that, yeah. Yeah, I looked at maybe Lang 19 or whatever it was with Michigan against Minnesota because Minnesota is just not very good.
No, they're not. Michigan will probably win that game by a lot, but they've also had some weird sleepy starts this year too, and that's on the road. It's a game that they probably control the whole way, but if they only won 21-3, it wouldn't necessarily shock me. So who knows?
I just my confidence isn't very high in anything that I'm betting right now, so I'm just kind of laying low. I did
see a couple go in, Dan.
I did consider a miserable Saturday money line parlay of Phillies and Oklahoma, just to really bring home the. I did bet the Phillies to win that series, because I think the price was wrong.
The price was probably, especially with the Phillies beat them last year in the playoffs too.
They did.
The price was a little wrong.
I actually think that this is the worst matchup potentially left for the Braves. I like them in a 7-game series against the Dodgers. I like them against anybody in the American League. I think the Phillies in a short series is not the best matchup for the Braves. I think the Phillies are a bad matchup for anybody because Citizens.
Their lineup is their lineup is just also a bad matchup, right? It's so deep, and you get them at home, and you get them hitting the ball a couple times. No, but that's they have. This is talking baseball on the Bloggerable. They have the one lineup left probably that you could on paper say is, if it's not on par with the Braves, it's pretty darn close to it. It is. It's incredibly deep.
I'll probably play if Nola and Wheeler. I'm assuming neither one of them is going to be able to go in game one because it'd be
probably Ranger Suarez in one, and then probably Wheeler.
Yeah, whoever game one over is probably a good look in that because Spencer Strider hasn't been super convincing. Also, lately, and he also doesn't have a ton of playoff experience, so you might see fireworks in that. And
he doesn't like crowds in the stands, right?
I know he does. He's just trolling.
He wants to go back to COVID times.
People don't realize that about him.
I know.
He's a big time troll. Anyway, that's going to do it for us. We will be back next week. We'll be back next week. And then the 2 weeks after that, Matt, I will do shows, but I am not going to be able to watch a ton of college football next weekend or the weekend after. I will tell you why after the show. It's nothing bad. It's just I'm not going to be,
that's all right.
We'll see what happens there, but we
can still find out what went on. We still know.
Oh yeah, I'll just have to go back and rewatch a lot of stuff. Yeah. But we will do that. We will be back on probably Tuesday to break this down. We'll break down a big Notre Dame win. We will break down a big Texas win as well. So we appreciate you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next time, and it is 1:13 on the East Coast, and OU still sucks.